I've always been with Sotheby's. And so anytime I moved to a new market, I had to figure out how to leverage the brand to give me that jump start. I didn't have, family in the neighborhood. I didn't have a knowledge of the brokers, the market, the pricing, anything, right? So I had to start from zero every single time. I was really fortunate to work with Jim on the front end when I moved to Chicago. And I think that it helped me put blinders on. I think there's so many shiny pennies in our industry, and you can go this way or that way, and everyone has an idea of which way to go. And I think that for me, it was just really easy to follow Jim's methodology. It allowed me to sort of just put blinders on, head down, trust in the process, and not expect an overnight success, but know that it was a slow build. And so that's all that I did every time that I moved. So when I left Chicago and moved to Denver, I was pregnant with twins. My husband was starting a new job. We had just bought a house in the West Loop. We were remodeling it, and we were doing everything that you're not supposed to do at the same time from a stress perspective. So took a year off in Denver and really just sat back and watched the market a bit, and then decided how I wanted to build the business here. So we manage about 100 files a year. And I realized when I was in Chicago, it was really, really easy for me just to tell my husband I'm late for dinner to like Babette, like that was easy. I think that telling like my kids that I'm late for dinner again just was like totally wearing on me. And so that is a huge part of why I'm so hyper structured and hyper organized. I think a huge part, sometimes people think like, oh, you're so busy, I don't want to interrupt it. And it's just that I have really, really strong
and it's always when somebody break me down with that doggone double good.
Okay, hey everybody, somebody's got their we got to hit the mute button here, whoever that is. Sorry, Mckinze.
All good. So I just I'm hyper organized, right? Like I know what I'm doing from 4 a.m. to 7 a.m. I know what I'm doing from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. I know what I'm doing from 9 to 10, 10 to 11, 11 to 12. Like everything is hyper organized, and it makes it so that I control my calendar, my day, and rather than the other way around, because that's just how it works, right? So that's really why I've made it this rigid. It also allows me to make sure that I'm capitalizing on the company tools and the corporate, the brand tools, right? We have so many tools at our fingertips, and it makes me, realize that I'm able to execute it every single time. If there's a really cool tool from Live Sotheby's, then I want to have it happen every single time. So that's why I built it like this. So we're going to go through one together. Oftentimes too, I wanted to like eliminate that peak and valley of the business, right? Where it's like I'm working my butt off and then all of a sudden it closes and I'm like, oh crap, there's nothing in the pipeline. So how I've built the system is really made so that it just kind of is a continuous flow rather than these high highs and low lows. I also wanted to be able to make sure that I could implement support roles effectively, right? If I had 100 steps in a process, I needed to be able to have them defined so that when I brought support people on, I could delegate those tasks without having to remember or expect a new person to know how I run the business. So these are the different systems that I've set up. What happens when you have a new listing? What happens when you have a new buyer? How do you time block the whole day? How do you manage the different marketing pillars? All my communication templates are templated. The listing presentation piece, CRM, assistant, onboarding, all of these are ones that we've developed. The one that we want to chat about is the contract to close on a new client today. Jim, is that sort of the hope?
Yeah, I think the point here today, team, is I want you to see what is possible when a system or process is built around anything. And I actually, Mckinze, heard something very interesting on a podcast a day or two ago. And this guy, he did what he called System Saturday. And every Saturday he built one system out for like 3 years. And at the end of it, people were paying him like 10 grand a day to come just observe what he had built around systems. So the goal for today, Mckinze, is for them to be able to see you and what you've created in terms of one particular system, and that it's not just one, like you said, it's 8 or 9 that you go really deep on over a long period of time. How long did it take you to build out all of those systems that you had?
I think that we had it all on like a little piece of paper, right? It was the things that you continually do over and over again. And then we audit and refine it every quarter. Like when we hear that, I don't know if or frankly refine it based on pain points, right? If we have a deal where a speed bump comes up that we've never experienced before, we put it as part of our checklist system for every file moving forward. So something as silly as like if something is in a different taxing district that caught us up in a file that we're not used to seeing different taxing districts here, then we make sure that that's part of our process whenever we write offers moving forward. So it's sort of been built. I mean, I've been doing this for 20 years. And so that's, most of this is out of pain points. I don't like having 8 p.m. inspection calls as I'm like trying to make dinner and put the kids to sleep, right? So all of it's built out of that over 2 decades.
So you built it out of pain points. That's where it started. Like this was just got too big. I had all this pain and I had to create something that relieved the pain.
Yeah.
And that's why you built it. Yeah.
Well, it's also an expensive company to work for, right? It's an expensive brand. And I wanted to make sure that if there was a tool that the company was putting out or the brand was putting out, that we were using it, right?
Yeah.
Like if somebody's paying for Matterport, then we want it every time. And that's not the case here, but if there was a tool that the company had, I wanted to make sure that it was used every single time. And we had a way to, not just sort of have the tools and not implement them. I mean, we don't implement everything. We see what fits in our business, but it's really multi-leveled, right? Everything kind of falls in on itself. And it's really hard, these are probably the easier systems to develop is like, what do you do when you have a new client? That's why I think we'll start with these guys.
Is that where you would start, Mckinze, if someone was building their systems from the beginning? Where would you start and what would be the kind of the cadence with where?
Yeah, I mean, I like a few of them. So the 3 that come to mind are, I love to have a buyer and seller pipeline so that people that enter your world have a place to live and you don't forget about them. Because oftentimes what happens is you get a text message or a call when you're away from your desk saying like, I'm moving to the Denver area, and how you respond is the difference of if that client stays engaged or not, and how you follow up is the difference if that client stays engaged, right? So we have a place where all of our leads, if you will, go if we're reached out to. And so if, Judy calls me, hi Judy, and says, I have someone moving to Denver, then it's easy enough for me to just put that person's like Judy's client in my pipeline. And then because I look at that pipeline every single day, it will remind me like, oh yeah, I took that message when I was in an inspection. I've got to follow up on that. So we also have subtasks for that pipeline. What are all the things that you want to do? Put their info into close. Do you connect with them on social? Do you schedule your initial conversation? Do you schedule your in-person onboarding meeting? Like those are all things that are the subtasks of the pipeline. So the pipeline's a huge one for me. I look at it every day. And then what you do with a new listing from the minute you go out to the person's house, get the listing agreement signed, all the prep work, once before it goes live, once you have photography, once it goes live, every week, how you communicate with the seller, once you're under contract, all the way through to closing. That's probably the second one. And then the third one is that same thing, but on the buy side. So I think that they can grow organically. I think the whole point of looking at what we're going to look at today is just to realize that there's different milestones that unfold different subtasks.
Cool.
Good.
Yeah, I love it.
Okay. So I'm going to just talk about, this is when you have like a new client. And this is on the buy side, since that's such a fun hot topic right now. And I will just sort of talk about these 8 milestones that we have when we have a new buyer, and then talk about like some of the subtasks that I do underneath. The best thing I sent Jim another document, which has just basically blank sheets so that you can fill in your own process. You can take what I do, or you can, of course it's probably unique to your market and your business, but so the first major milestone is that initial interaction, right? So what happens when someone calls and they say, I'm moving to the area? For me, I always make that phone call like really light, really bubbly, really kind of funneling into that like me box the most, right? Because you want to instantly make them feel like we've got this, we've done this hundreds of times, you don't need to call anybody else. So it's a very bubbly, light conversation. It's not a the market's really tough right now, or any buyer agency conversations. For me, it's very much, how do we go from a phone call to an in-person meeting? So that initial phone call is always light, trying to figure out, okay, when are you moving here? Do you know much about real estate here? What's your knowledge? Trying to gauge a little bit about how the relationship's going to go, like first time home buyer versus this is a second home for us, something. So having that initial questionnaire that you mentally run through with the client is one of my steps. We always then do anything possible to arrange an in-person meeting in the office, because I've moved markets so many times that it's been very easy for me to always have that in-person meeting. We call it a buyer orientation. We've done that since I've moved here in 2014. So for the last 10 years, we go over a little bit of the harder stuff, right? What is the purchase contract look like? What are the decisions you're going to have to make? What are the levers you can pull in order to make your offer more competitive if you're in a competitive situation? So we do anything possible to get that meeting in office. Those meetings right now were about an hour and a half. Now they're about 2 hours long. And those are in-person, in-office meetings. We don't do a single thing after that meeting until the engagement agreement is signed. We call them engagement agreements, just like if you were going to hire an attorney, right? Or a landscape architect, or someone to plan your kid's birthday. We always have a very clear conversation of how we're compensated, what the avenues can be, and we go almost line by line through that agency agreement. We also set up the MLS with them while we're in office so that they can see kind of the whole map. We can draw little pockets about where they want, and that instantly sets up their MLS. So that's part of that subtask.
Mckinze, I'm going to interrupt you real quick. The reason you this sounds like a long time, right? Hour and a half to 2 hours. Oh my gosh, that's a long time. But guess what? When they find something that they like, you've already taken them through the entire offer, right? You can send it to them. They understand it. Here's the terms. There's not a lot of questions when you don't have time, because there might be multiple people interested in that property. So you're getting all of that work done up front so that you don't have to do it when time is of the essence.
Yeah, and I don't think anyone else does it. And so I think that we talk about those pain points, like how do you feel when someone says they're waiving the inspection? How does that make you feel? Because in our market, like no one ever waives the inspection. They just waive the right to ask the seller to fix things, right? So oftentimes buyers don't understand the verbiage. And so we talk about all those things, because I've had buyers say, well, I would never waive the inspection. And then the reality is you have to sometimes limit that ask on the contract if you ever want to get your offer accepted. Like, I know exactly what it takes to win, but we need to make sure you're comfortable with that. We need to make sure you know which levers you can pull and how you feel about what your risk tolerance is around that. And I need to do that now before we're standing in your dream home and there's 6 other people and we're talking at 8 p.m. when I'm trying to make mac and cheese, right? Like that's what I don't want to do.
Right.
So yeah, it's a long meeting. And I think that it just instantly differentiates the other people that just go and open a door, right? It also helps me understand their dynamic. It helps me understand their financial knowledge when it comes to lending and financing. It helps that it's a huge opportunity for me to set the stage for myself as much as it is for them. And it gets all of the little like, wow, we should have covered that earlier stuff out of the way, right? It allows people to, it's more efficient that way. We don't spin our wheels looking in a neighborhood because you anticipated getting into that school, not knowing that that school has a 300-person waiting list. Right. So it's more of a time saver for me than anything, that meeting.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So the third piece is very much when we're searching and offering on places. So we have a separate checklist whenever we're filling out an offer that I can sort of answer 3 questions and templates get populated based on those 3 questions, right? Is it finance? Is it cash? Is it competitive? Is it not competitive? How competitive is it? What do I need to remember? Because there's always those things like that taxing district, right? Like that was a new thing that we don't usually interact with, but now needs to be top of mind for every house that we think about moving forward. So we have a very, very refined offering checklist that we go through. And so that's kind of that third milestone. The search part on the buy side is also very, very strategically set up. We have it as part of our time block process to look at off-market shadow inventory. We have about 60% of our inventories in the shadows right now. And so we have it as part of our routine to go down our pipeline and making sure that we're interacting with everyone who's hot every 48 hours, anyone who's warm every 3 to 4 days, anyone who's long-term every 1.5 weeks. So something, not like, are you still looking? But hey, I just walked through this for another client, thought you would love it, even though like maybe it wasn't for another client, but just continue to push the value. Or hey, I just had a lender get a whatever rate for this client that closed last week. So something that's more than just checking in. Are you still buying? Right. So that's part of our kind of stay top of mind process. We have really templated communication pieces when we're putting an offer together. We don't just send an offer to the other side and say, here's our offer, send. We have a templated, I think it's like 6 paragraphs long, that talks about, you know, the emotional side of it, what our clients love about the house, thanking the agent, making the listing agent look amazing because we know it's just going to be forwarded to the seller, the financial strength of everyone's jobs, the strength of the lender that's on the file, and then my background, right? We manage X files a year. We've never dropped, like we haven't terminated on a deal and blah, blah, blah. So something that's all templated so that it's not just offer sent. And the only thing that can be compared is then the price.
So you template everything out so that when the seller gets it, your presentation of your buyer immediately stands out because of the how you presented them, and it's all templated out. All you got to do is fill in the blanks, and you do it once, but boom. So
yeah, and so much of that is because I received so many offers. Like we had 9 offers on a property this past weekend, and I mean, it's comical how terribly they were written. And it made me want to write an article anonymously about the importance of a good buy-side agent, because it was shocking. Like we had 9 offers, 2 were well written and 7 were just horrendous. And so my seller didn't like them for a variety of reasons. For example, one of them included, and they were like the top 3 on the price point, one of the buy-side agents included in their contract that the seller would have the home professionally cleaned upon move out. That is fine to include in our market when you're the only person offering on a house and it's filthy. It is not fine to include in a multi-offer situation and the house is spotless, because the seller was pissed and they were like, I don't even want to settle this person, even though the number was up there. So it's just, we really try to make sure that we're presenting it in a way that makes the seller reads it and smiles and wants to even continue the conversation with us, even if we're not the highest. So yeah, it's templated.
yeah, so do it once and let it do its work for the remainder of your career. That's a beautiful thing about systems and processes, right, Mckinze, is the create it once and let it do its work over the life of your business. Making little tweaks here and there, obviously, but you know, that's what a professional agent does.
We absolutely tweak things based on, you know, additional pain points or changes in our industry or something, right? We even though we had an amazing onboarding buyer orientation, we of course change things when, you know, now the conversation is a bit different. So, yeah, it's just that I don't want to remember what I'm supposed to be saying when I'm submitting at 9 p.m. because there's no way it's going to be submitted as well, right? So within 24 hours under contract, we have a ton of things to do. And all of these subtasks that are under each milestone are hyper micro. So it is as simple as connect the buyer with the title agent, check in with the title agent to make sure they sent wiring instructions, confirm with the buyer they have wiring instructions, confirm with the buyer they sent the wire, confirm with the title company they received the wire, confirm that we have a receipt, confirm that the receipt's in the file. Like that's just for earnest money, right? Because if you miss one of those steps, then things can go sideways and now all of a sudden you're putting band-aids on things. And maybe, you know, those aren't me tasks, right? That's the value of having it written down, is that eventually if you have support, you can delegate easily. But that's how micro our tasks are. It's not just send earnest money, right? It's because a week from now, I could need that earnest money receipt and I need to know where to go look. And if that receipt wasn't uploaded, then I won't know where to go look. So it's basically defining the perfect business down to the micro task.
But is it fair to say that at some point when you were building out your processes, there was a pain point that created those subtasks?
Totally.
So what this is just the length of time that you've been doing this, that it's like, okay, Rachel, add those 4 tasks. We screwed this deal up over earnest money and we lost the deal, whatever.
Make sure that never happens again.
Never happens again. So you go build 4 steps into your Monday.com for earnest money only, and then it doesn't happen again. See what I'm saying?
That's
right?
100%. It's just all that it is of course you can flow through a file based on what you remember. We have so many, we probably manage 100 files a year. It's just too many to remember all of those things. Not to mention, I can't anticipate that any support person is going to know what's on my mind or how I've been doing this for 20 years. So we've built it so that every single step to the micro decision is in there and just written as an easy like check off task. Now, that can totally be on paper and stapled to the front of your file folder if that's how you do it. But it definitely is okay if it starts with 10 things and then it, unravels as you go.
I think that's important here, guys. Remember, Mckinze's been doing this for a long time. She has been building out these systems. You've had a lot of pain points, and I know you've been doing this for, as I don't even remember, 5 to 7 years probably, in terms of building this out. But it started with 10 steps, and then it just kept going layers and layers and layers. And then also the other thing too that I'd like to bring up about all of this is that when you do add capacity, you do add someone to your team, you got something to train them to.
Yeah.
Right. So.
And you can have all the templates in there so that they're responding the way you want to respond, right? Like, attorney review period is unique to your market, which is why I put that in there. But there's always things that you want to be proactive to. I think a lot of our subtasks are just to be proactive. For example, Rachel at my office, she runs all the operations behind the scenes. And every Tuesday, she checks in with every party on every file. So she'll email the lender, even if we're on the listing side, and we'll say, Rachel at Mckinze's office, just wondering if there's anything on your list that I can help with. It's not my job to help the buyer's lender at all. However, if they're waiting for a document and it's playing some game of telephone and eventually is going to happen the day of closing, I'd rather know about it early. So she reaches out to every single party in the transaction. The broker on the other side, our client, lenders on the other side, title agents. Is there anything that's on your to-do list that we can be helpful with? And thank you so much for reaching out. We haven't been able to get a hold of the HOA. Do you have a better contact there? Right. So it's a super proactive system so that we minimize the amount of fire drills.
And pain points.
Yeah. I'm very sensitive to that. Yeah. And then we have very specific things that happen 2 weeks before closing, right? We have to check to make sure all the inspection items were fixed. I don't want to go to a walkthrough and find out that they didn't actually replace the furnace or service the furnace. I don't want to find that out at the walkthrough. We write in our resolutions that all has to happen, in advance of closing. So that's what those check-ins are for. Does the seller have all their utilities swapped? Does the buyer, can we remind the buyer not to go buy a car? Does the lender have everything they need? Just any of those things. Again, whenever there's a pain point, it goes on the list. What would you love to see buttoned up 2 weeks before closing, right? Same with 3 days before closing. Do we have clear to close? Do we have all the finances? Does buyer have wiring instructions? Do they know where they're going? Do they know what to bring? All of that stuff. So same with the 3 days prior to closing. And then post-closing, what are all the things that we're doing after closing? Are we scheduling 24-hour, 1 week, 1 month, and yearly check-ins? Are we sending something because they've got moving day? Do we make sure that they're categorized properly in close? Do we make sure that we've tagged them post-closing in close properly? Do we do a post-mortem as a team? Okay, what went well, what went bad? What do we need to change in the systems? Those are all post-closing tasks.
We get Joe Kirk next week on close.
Hey, Jim, can I ask a question for Mckinze?
Yep.
Yes. Hey, Mckinze, it's been a minute. Yeah, so
Yeah,
question for
there
you. So for the post like closing initiatives that you're doing and reach
Yeah.
out, can
Yeah.
you share some that's awesome. Can you share like one or two success stories where you were able to circumnavigate like what was like the pain point, the problem, and you were able
Yeah.
to remedy like Rachel remedy that situation. And I will be
Yeah.
quiet from here on out.
So let's just look at a file because that's fun. So this is my Monday platform. So our post closing looks like this. It's very long. So if we have a referral, like if somebody referred me a client, then I would send a note to them like, hey, Judy, such good news. Jimmy just bought his house. We're so excited for him. Just want to let you know that he's all closed in case you want to reach out. We always request a testimonial from the agent that referred us because we make it an active part of our business to make sure that we are keeping them up to date every week. It's not like you just hand me a referral and then it's gone. Like, hey, we met with them today. We showed them these places. And so we want to hear from another broker, their experience of referring to us, right? So that testimonial request is on there. We have to send all of our closing packets to the relocation team because that's what we have here. So these are just tasks, right? Again, not a me task, but is something that has to get done. I don't like my relocation company department, emailing me saying, can I get the closing paperwork? To me, that seems like they would then have a lack of confidence in me. I want to send that to them before they even ask for it. Does that make sense?
Yep.
I always change their home address in close because now they live in a new place. I ensure they're properly categorized in close with the tag that I use, the year they bought, and that they're a buyer of that year. I set a calendar invite for 1 week, 1 month, 6 month, and yearly reoccurring anniversaries on my calendar. That is part of our gifting system that we built. And so that goes into another kind of spoke of the wheel. We have Real Scout on our end. So we update the client on their neighborhood every month and quarter. So we have to set those systems up. We have our CRM is organized based on how often I want to interact with these people. So we set the client touch point communication order in our CRM. We add notes from the buyer pipeline into close, and we remove the client from the pipeline. They're no longer someone you need to watch every day. They now go into a close category under close. And any notes that we had from the file get converted over so that we know what, school, whatever the notes were from the file. We have a master transaction spreadsheet, so we throw it in there. We throw in the commission split, so we have good reporting that we can report to our coaches at the end of the year. We always draft a story. We call it a case study for every file. So we like to say, this person was relocating from Chicago. They had to get their kids in school. Here's how we helped them. More than just the just sold $1 million. Like, no, this was this beautiful family that moved. Here's how we made things easy for them. Here's what, how many times we had to offer. Here's how our process was so that we can pitch that on social and in our email marketing.
That's a brilliant point. Everybody should write down. People don't want to see just closed, just listed. They want to see you help the family get from point A to point B.
Yeah, and how and why
And how and why me, right?
Yep.
Yep.
So the day after the closing, we have an Instagram post that just says, no, it's a know me part of the know you, like you, trust you, right? So the know me part is that we're promoting stuff onto social that's very systematized, right? If there's a closing, an IG post goes out the next day with the most beautiful photo of the house. The day after, if it's a relocation, then we have kind of like a Chicago to Denver post. We don't like to tag agents on the relocation piece because we've got a big network. And so we like to just post that we helped manage another transfer from where, like our Jameson office to the Live office. We make sure that it's closed in MLS. Sometimes the agent on the other side doesn't do it. And so that is a safety net of a pain point. We always send a Zillow request, and we have very clear verbiage. It's not the standard stock. Please review me. It is very much like, hi, we were thrilled to be a part of this chapter in your life. as you know, many new clients just search online when they're looking for an agent. We would love it if you could say a little bit about your experience with us to help future clients, understand what it's like working with us, right? We pitch it that way. We would like to guide those. In Zillow, you sometimes have to confirm that Zillow is attaching your ID to the sale. And so we confirm that that is there because that's not always the case. We always do a post-mortem on the Tuesday after because that's when we meet together. So we say, okay, this closed last week. How did it go? What worked? What didn't work? How do we want to categorize them differently in our CRM? And then we always do a handwritten note for the broker on the other side to try to retain the most positive relationship within the industry locally as possible. So
which is pretty important right now, right? When you got to go find inventory, you call it shadow inventory. We don't we kind of call it off market, private, in the private. So so essentially what you have here is Monday.com. In that, when you do the post closing, can you go back there real quick?
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
No, you're good. Could you just take them through the columns there and what those mean to you in terms of status and show them how that kind of works functionally?
Yeah. So so this is the after closing milestone, right? Like we don't even look at this blue category. And you can see like this particular file, we have clearly gotten a green status bar, 100%. And then once under contract, we've completed all of those tasks, 100%. You can see on the deadlines, we're 90% through the deadlines. We do weekly check-ins every Tuesdays. We've done 1 of 2 check-ins because that's all organized based on how many actual check-ins there will be. We're not 2 weeks prior to closing. That's why none of them are done yet. We're not 3 days, we're not closed, and there's no PCOA. So the micro subtasks are, again, the status bar of when something gets finished, who it's assigned to. I'm the little yellow dot. I'm just yellow. Rachel manages the rest. And keep in mind, people are sometimes like, well, I don't have an assistant or whatever. This was 100% my little face before it was Rachel's little face. And we designed this all so that I didn't lose my mind, so that I came to the office and I was like, oh, if you look at May 24th, I have a lot of tasks to do, right? But I don't think about these tasks until May 24th, right? So it just has a status and a due date. And so I know that all this stuff has to get done on the 24th. So it almost time blocks and figures out my day for me.
Can you hit the status bar on one of those so you can see what the selections are?
Oh, yeah. And you can customize all these, but like, this is a way that Rachel and I would be able to communicate is if I was working on something, then I would say work. If I was stuck because I needed her help, then I could put it on stuck and it would ping her and say, hey, Mckinze's stuck with this task. Monday is we've customized the hell out of this. This is very much just like an empty blank Excel spreadsheet when you get this. But we've spent a really long time customizing this, and it is something that I probably wouldn't roll out unless you have everything on paper first. If you have every single one of your steps on paper, which could take a year to build, then if it's important to you to have a cloud-based system, then I think that there's nothing better than Monday. But you have to really make sure that it's a very, very complex system that I would suggest paper before this.
Hey, Mckinze, for you, for the team, I'm sorry to interject the last time, is for the team to build this robust system out. You said it took a long time, like a year. Did you have a starting point that helped you like navigate within like Monday app or whatever apps that someone wants to use to like, what would be like 5 things that they would have a starting point to get used to like a CRM like this, like advice?
Yeah, I mean, I would just figure out like this is my contract to close process, right? We also have like listing processes, right? Where when you have a new listing, what you do we have 73 sub items. So I think it just depends on the system you want to roll out. And then you figure out which milestones matter to you, right? So for us on the new listing side, we have 73 subtasks whenever we bring on a new listing. What happens every time we have an open house? What happens every Monday in our seller reports? What happens once we're under contract deadlines, whatever. So I think it just depends on the system you're trying to roll out. If you just want to manage your day, you could build it through this. But again, I probably wouldn't recommend jumping to this. As you can see, there's probably, I don't know, 200 tasks just in this board. And then there's, 15 just open seller file. It's just a lot. So I would say the paper part works best for your buyer pipeline, seller pipeline. What do you do when you're under contract? And that's it. Like, I would just start with those three. I wouldn't try to bring it in here unless you're truly, want to dive deep into Monday.
You could create a Google Doc as well, or a Google Sheet. If you want to be a little bit more automated, that's where I have a lot of people start. Because you can add it.
Like really watered down templates because people ask us to help all the time. We made really, really watered down templates that I can share. It's just the way that Monday is so intertwined with every aspect of your business, right? And so unless you're really ready to have like all your systems dialed and then put them all together, it's just it's a challenge. And we've even hand holding with other people, it's still a challenge. So I think you'd have to be committed to getting it on paper first, because you can't run a file through the system unless the system's built. And so it's really hard to know what to do on a new listing, right? Like, what are the 15 things you do after you get signed paperwork? What are the things you need to remember every time for day of photography? For example, like we have to remind our photographer every time he's there that we need at least 5 verticals, because those will go to Instagram. We need architectural photos because that's what we use for our brochure. And we have to get a front door because that is part of an end of year marketing campaign that we put together, right? So it's like that has to happen day of photography every single time. Same with remind the photographer that we like straight on well-framed architectural shots. Like, we don't know which photographer we're getting to the house, and they may not remember what we care about, but I can't get the photo deck back and be like, shoot, we forgot the front door. Now our campaign's messed up, right? So it's just, that's how this all flows. And I think that it's very complex unless you just start with like a blank sheet of paper. What's everything I want to do after someone calls me? What are all the things you want to do,
One of these every Saturday for an hour for a year, you got 52 systems built. 1 hour of time blocking. 1 hour of time blocking. Time blocks, what I'm going to talk about on Monday on my pep talk, is a time block is a micro deadline. You're giving yourself one little task to do in 1 hour, just like you would like in a quarter. Time blocking, I'm going to get this one thing done in the next hour. And every one of those sections that she has, you could build out and then improve it over the course of multiple files. So what you guys are seeing here is an example of what somebody has built over years. And it looks like Mckinze has got some sheets for us. Is that what you sent me? Is that what Rachel sent me?
I was trying to see if I could get it. Hold on, let me see if I can get it to the whole thing. So one thing that is the easiest way to do it is just to follow yourself around with these forms, right? So your initial interaction with a new client, like just write down the things that you want to do in that situation, right? What do you want to do the second that a client calls you? And just having these printed like this and writing down like, oh, I should figure out how they like to communicate, and not in a cheesy way, but just be like, is email best for you? Like phone, what do you prefer? Right. And that's important to know, right? If they're looking in Cherry Creek, maybe it's important to set an MLS alert so that when things are coming in that neighborhood, to where you can just forward them something that's coming. So I think just having initial sheets at the beginning is really helpful, and knowing each micro, milestone. What do you do when you're onboarding a client? What are the things that you want to talk about? Do you want in that engagement meeting? Same with, what do you do when they're searching? How do you set things up? What do you do once they're under contract? These are a way that you can just write things down over the next, whatever quarter.
Like she said, start somewhere. Start with, I'm going to put together this little presentation, print out the pieces of paper, write your steps down, and maybe then you go into a Google sheet and then you invest the time into Monday. You do not do projects like this during harvest season. This is a Q3, Q4 project where you're actually going to build out a Monday.com or something like that. So, but you can write all of your steps down as you go through files, so it's all there and you don't have to think about it step by step. So I really want to reiterate that what Mckinze built here has been done over years. But you can make two choices. You can start today, little by little, and build it out like 1 hour a week, build one system per week for 52 weeks, and you are ahead of 99.5% of the brokers in the market. So that is my advice for you. That is what Mckinze did. She said when she went to my Take Flight in 2011, it was like the light bulbs were going on about different parts of the business and what you need to do. And this is where she's at, what, 12 years later, 13 years later? So last piece here, Mckinze, parting words, and then I really want everybody to get their phone out. I want you to pull up your Instagram right now, give Mckinze a follow, and it's just at Mckinze Casey, right? MC, you want to spell it out for him?
I'll put it in the chat.
So it's MC Kinze Casey Casey, and it's in the chat. Follow her as a big thank you for being here today. What else? Where else can we follow you and things like that?
So I have a super secret private board where Rachel, my amazing ops girl, and I post sort of systems that have been developed out of pain points or systems tasks that have been developed out of pain points. And so on that Hey MC, that's where we post those. So anytime we like talk to offices about systems or anything like that, that is the private page that we just started where anytime we have a pain point and it results in a subtask, that's where we're going to put them. So
at Hey MC, go into your Instagram, mark her as a favorite so you can, be a part of our ecosystem. We're here to grow and help agents grow. And that's what Take Flight's all about. And any other parting words before we say goodbye, Mckinze, or any thoughts?
But no, if you do have support people, that's the biggest hurdle is like having to tell them what to do and when to do it. If you get to a house, I don't have the code, write that down as a pain point to figure out how to make a system around it. This client asked this question and it seems like put that in the system farther up. The second that I have a pain point or something comes to my mind, I'm texting Rachel at my office, like put this in the boards. This has to go in the boards, right? I cannot show up to a property and not have the code instantly available. And so how do we create a system around that so that never happens again? Keeping them with you is the...
One last question. These systems procure more business for you?
Totally. We have everything under control. Like there's not a single file that I don't know where it is. We probably have 15 open files right now. And I could go into those boards and see where every single one is. We have safety nets for everything. If someone refers me a client in the last hour that I've been on this Zoom, we have safety nets in place so that I don't forget about that person. That's a win. How many times do you get a new client and you're in the middle of something? Every single time. Having those safety nets in place of those subtasks in line with the pipeline is the total win. That's how you don't have someone be like, I called you last Tuesday and you never called me back. And we forgot. I have the worst memory ever. Yeah, totally.
All right, friend. Well, thank you so much for giving us your time today. We'll see you at G&E or before then, for sure.
I'm already planning my outfits.
Bye. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it. We'll see you next week on the Zoom with Joe Kirk. Thanks, Mckinze. Bye.